going to be doing another reading vlog. This one has no challenge. I'm not trying to read for 24 hours. I'm not trying to do any crazy volume goal. I'm just trying to read for the weekend, and I'll show you what I'm reading. So I have some idea of what I'd like to read this weekend. I would like to start Basara, which is the main thing I need to read for May. So I would like to start that on the Viz app. And then I have some other things I haven't read in a while. So I have The Strange House, Volume 3. Absolutely loving this series, so can't wait to read that volume. Then we have 100 Ghost Stories That Will Lead to My Own Death, Volume 2. Really enjoyed this first volume. Very episodic horror manga. I hate it when you compare horror manga to Junji Ito, but the last story in Volume 1 definitely felt like Junji Ito. So we'll see if this continues that. I also have JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Shining Diamonds, Demonic Heartbreak. I'm not sure if I'm going to read this for this video because I feel like I can't talk about it because of spoilers for different parts of the manga, but we'll see. I might read this since the final volume came out recently. And I have some one-shots, so I did participate in the one-shot readathon last month in April, and then immediately after that I received some more one-shots that I'd like to read. First off, more horror. We have Toxic Daughter Chi-chan from Shuzo Yoshimi, so very, very excited to read this. Then we have the newest work in English from an author who is very, very quickly becoming one of my favorite manga authors, and that is Tamaki Ammane by Fumi Yoshinaga. So I think this has some sci-fi elements, like people meeting each other throughout different reincarnations of their life, I think. Maybe. Could be wrong about that, but that's what I think it's about. I'm very excited to read this. I've enjoyed absolutely everything I've read from Fumi Yoshinaga. But the big one, the main one I want to read is They Were 11 by Moto Hagio, another one of my favorite manga authors. So yeah, finally this was released. It's a really nice release. I'll talk about it more later. But on the way over here to film this video, I did drop it on the floor. I'm not sure you can tell, but there's now a crease in the back cover. So that's great. Love that for me. It's fine. Obviously, it's not going to affect my reading experience, but it does make me kind of mad. So I am going to be reading this in this video for sure. So yeah, those are just some of the things I'm hoping to read. Maybe I'll read all of them. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll read some other things. We'll see. I don't know what's going to happen this weekend, but I'm going to take you along with me. So this morning I have been reading Basara. This is the main series that my TBR jar decided I need to read in these spring months between April, May, and June. So I'm reading it. The other two were one-shots. I already read those. But so this is my big project for May. Might be like the only big series that I read this month. We'll see. But anyway, I've read the first volume so far and I am enjoying it. So I didn't know anything about this, but it turns out this is about a girl named Sarasa, and she is a twin, and she kind of feels not quite like an outcast, but she doesn't really know her place in the world because her brother, her twin brother, is said to be the child of destiny, who is basically prophesied to save not only their village, but the entire country that they live in, which is Japan. So Sarasa kind of just wanders around doing her own thing. She has this friend she hangs out with, but she really doesn't know her place in the world because her brother has this huge destiny and she's just Sarasa. But of course, that would not really make an adventure story. So one day, the village that they live in is attacked by the Red King, and he basically destroys the village, kills a bunch of the villagers, including Sarasa's brother. And that's a problem considering he's the child of destiny, so Sarasa basically has to become his role or pretend to be him in order to lead her villagers not only to safety but also to seek revenge. So I didn't really know much about this series when I started it. I knew that it was an adventure story and it's pretty long at 27 volumes, which is not a problem for me. I like long series, but I thought it was historical, and it's not. It actually takes place at least 300 years in the future, so that's interesting. In this version of future Japan, it's basically an entire desert, or at least all the areas we've seen are covered in desert, and it is led by this king who has these sons who basically control different parts of Japan. And so the part that Sarasa and her village live in is controlled by the Red King, and he's pretty evil. He has an idea for how he wants the country to be run. He does not agree with his father, but he will basically do anything he can to enact that goal. And he does some pretty evil things, like killing villages who say they have a prophesied child who will also try to control the country. At least I think that's what he thinks. He basically is trying to get rid of anybody who he feels is going to stand in the way of his goal. And we do get some chapters from his perspective, which are interesting, but mostly on Sarasa we're focusing on. So I like Sarasa. I mean, she as a character is a little bit whiny, maybe you would say, but I mean, her situation is crazy and sad, so it's understandable. The fact that she is so immediately willing to take her brother's place and be the leader that she never planned on being. She was pretty much forgotten about as a child because all the focus was on her brother, but now she feels she needs to become the leader that her brother was. Even her villagers, the people that she's lived with for her entire life, believe that she is her brother instead of her. They believe that she died and her brother lived, and so she has to take his place. And yeah, that's a lot to deal with, obviously. So she's a really interesting character. Of course, there are times where she's very sad about this, and I appreciate manga that give us a glimpse into characters' emotions like that. So I'm really liking this so far. I will say the art is not my favorite. There are some times where I really have to stare at the panel to figure out what's happening, and it could be because I'm reading it on the Viz app and the scans on there are really not that great sometimes. But that's pretty much my only complaint. I am really interested to learn more about how the world came to be like this, because it does take place in the future, and we get a little mention of something that stopped the progress of civilization in the early 21st century, which is interesting. Of course, I love an adventure story. I love the hero's journey, and Sarasa is a character that I'm excited to see progress and step into her role as leader. There are some other characters so far, like Ageha. I think that's how you say his name. He's like kind of a mysterious figure who saved Sarasa when she was a child, and I would like to learn more about. There's some other characters and some situations I'm not sure I can talk about because they take place in the first volume, and I really want to talk about them, but I'm not sure if they would be considered spoilers. So we'll see. I'm not sure if I'm going to read any more of this weekend. I might. We'll see. So I do have to film another video. Finally, I will finally be getting up a tri-volume video. By the time you're watching this, that one will already be up, so check it out if you haven't. But what I really want to be reading right now is They Were 11 by Moto Hagio. So finally, we got this after like 2 years of being delayed. So I will fully admit, I complain about Denpa a lot, but I must give credit where credit is due. This is a beautiful, well-made book. So even the back is really nice. It has French flaps, as we can see here, with a really cool image on the inside. A poster that I'm not going to take out, but it has like the same image on the back, and then we have our main character here, I think. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't read this. And then some beautiful color pages. It's really hard to show you how big this book is, but really beautiful color pages. And then some pink pages as well. So this is a very well-made book, and it's only $20. And with the price that some manga are at right now, I feel like $20 is kind of a steal for a book that's this nice. It's also, I'm sure you can tell, it's very tall. It's an oversized volume. So yeah, I complain about Denpa a lot, but this is a very, very well-made book and almost worth the wait. So I've loved all the works by Moto Hagio that I've read, so I will be back once I've read this and have some thoughts to share. Alright, so it's quite a bit later in the day now. I did finish They Were 11. It took me quite a bit longer than I thought it would to finish this, but I will talk about the reason why that was in a minute. But I did end up finishing this, and like every Moto Hagio work, I really enjoyed this. This is a sci-fi action story. At the beginning, we follow 11 characters, and they are basically in this training academy thing, and this is their final test, and they are sent onto a spaceship, and they are told to stay there for 53 days to survive. And the problem is that they are told that there will only be 10 people on board, but there are 11, so they have to figure out who the imposter is. And so that's about half of this volume, a little less than half of this volume. And for whatever reason, I thought that would be the entire story, but it's actually not. So after that, we follow a few of the characters from that first story in a different story. So I definitely enjoyed the first part a lot more than the second part. The second part was kind of slow going. It's a more political story with like conflicts in between these two separate planets. So it was interesting, but it did take a while for me to become invested in that story. Whereas the main story, I was hooked right from the beginning, and I had a great time reading that. This is a sci-fi manga taking place very far in the future with a bunch of different planets that have people living on them. Not human people, like aliens, but they all look kind of like humans. So I would actually have loved to have seen many more stories in this world, because there are so many different planets and different groups of people. At the beginning, you have this little introduction page that kind of explains what happened and how there were discovery of alien planets and stuff like that. And there are hints of like different religions that the groups have, but we don't really see a lot of that in here. We do see some interesting issues around gender and discussions of that. Some of the alien groups or people, they have different biological aspects that go into their interpretation of gender. I thought that was very fascinating. The art, of course, is gorgeous. I mean, I showed you some of the color pages earlier, but Moto Hagio's work is just so beautiful. I love that it's very obviously shoujo art style with the sparkles and the huge eyes and stuff, but also very obviously like 70s, because if you've read any Kazuo Mez, you know that he does the eyes and the way he draws the faces. And I noticed a couple times reading this, some of Moto Hagio's faces also look similar to that. So I haven't actually ever made that connection before, but I did notice it in this one, even though the art style in this is not that much different from her other works. I just didn't notice it before now. But I think her art really shines in a sci-fi setting where you get lots of big pictures of space and stuff like that. It's very ethereal. So here's a good example. You can see the beautiful way she draws her characters as well as landscapes. So yeah, I had a great time reading this. No complaints, really. It's not my new favorite Moto Hagio work or anything, but I do hope we get more of her works. I know there are quite a few of her works that haven't been licensed in English yet, and I would love to read them because so far I have not disliked a single thing I've read from this author. So the reason that it took me so long to read that is I read half of it, or read that first part called They Were 11, and then I decided to take a break and pick up this, which is called Strange Pictures. The reason I wanted to read this is because it's by an author called Uketsu, and when I saw this book, I realized that that name sounds familiar, and then I noticed that it's actually the author of the novel that this manga is based on. So this is a manga adaptation of a novel by Uketsu. This is not the novel that this is based on, but it is by the same author. And since I love The Strange House so much, especially the atmosphere and how creepy it is, I wanted to try out this. So normally I don't talk about books on this channel, but I feel like I've loopholed my way into being able to talk about this book on my channel. So anyway, I was reading They Were 11. I decided I needed a little bit of a break and just a little refresher. So I read this, or I started reading it, and then I read half of it in one sitting. And I mean, it's not a huge book, and there are pictures in it, so that helped, but I was completely engrossed in this just in the same way that I was engrossed in the manga of The Strange House, so that's a really good sign. Basically, this is a story about, we open with a guy, well actually we don't open with this guy, we open with something else, but the first main part of the story is a guy comes across this blog, which seems kind of straightforward at first. There's like entries of him and his wife, and they're expecting a kid, and they're talking about that, and the wife draws pictures for what she envisions the future of her child will be. And then the last entry you see is very ominous. So the main guy, he's not really a main character, but he is at the beginning, and he basically wants to figure out what is going on with this strange blog. Who was this person? Who was running it? What are the secrets that he uncovered? Kind of like The Strange House and us trying to figure out what is going on with the floor plan. So throughout this book, you see pictures that are creepy. Some of them are more creepy than others. Let me see if I can find one that doesn't spoil anything. Look, a baby. Look, a kid. And throughout the story, the pictures can get pretty spine chilling. Not like scary right away, but the connection between the pictures and what's being revealed in the story is a little creepy. And also, just like The Strange House, where I don't want to talk about this at all besides telling you to read it, this is one I'm not going to say anything more than that. It is creepy. It is very atmospheric. Like I said, I read half of it in one go, and then once I finished They Were 11, I went back and finished this book because I was that enthralled by it. I don't know what it is about the inclusion of creepy pictures that makes a book so much more readable than it normally would be without the creepy pictures. But yeah, I loved it. Had a great time. I would happily read another book by this author. I know there are a couple more out there. I don't think they've been released in English yet or translated into English yet. And I am glad that the one that is translated into English is not this one, so I can continue to enjoy the manga without being spoiled. But I would happily read more from this author, so I like how I found a way to talk about a book on this channel. Maybe I will try to connect more books to manga, and then that will give me an excuse to talk about more books on this channel. So I do have to edit that video I filmed earlier, so I'll probably do that, and I don't think I have enough time to read anything else tonight, so I will be back tomorrow with another update. I am planning on reading this volume of The Strange House next, and then maybe another horror manga, but we'll see. Okay, so it's the next day. It's actually pretty late in the day. I had some stuff going on this morning, so I've only read 2 volumes of manga at this point. We'll see how much more I read today. I'm not sure. But the first one I read today was 100 Ghost Stories That Will Lead to My Own Death, Volume 2. So this one is just short stories, and they're creepy and scary, and I like them all. There hasn't been one that I haven't liked so far in both of the volumes that I've read. But 100% the most interesting thing about this manga is the frame narrative. So we have this character here, who normally doesn't have some demon coming out of his head. He's just this little kid who's telling us the story in his bedroom. I'm not sure if we are from like the point of view of a camera, if he's recording this or what. He's definitely talking to us, the reader. But he's basically telling us these stories, and it's really interesting because he obviously has something going on in his home life that is dark. There is another character that we hear talk, well, here we see their dialogue bubbles. They talk to the main character, and there's just some weird things going on there. I'm not sure what it is yet. There's some hints, but obviously something is going on with his home life. And that kind of, when you're reading these short stories, you're starting to make connections between the stories and the situation that he's potentially in. We're not quite sure yet, but that is so interesting. It's such a great way to do a short story collection like this because it just adds another element of intrigue, and I love that. I think that as well, like the art is great. I love how creepy these short stories are. The short stories themselves can stand on their own, but the fact that we have this added element of whatever is going on with this kid is great to me. So having a fantastic time with this series, and this is one I don't feel like you need to read it, like binge the entire series at once. It's perfectly fine to read these every few months when the volumes come out, but having a great time. Here, look at the back. It's also very creepy. And then the only other volume I've read so far today is Toxic Daughter Chi-chan by Shuzo Oshimi. So this I knew was like a tie into a movie. There's a movie called Toxic Daughter, and this seems to be a prequel to that story, like kind of Chi's origin story, I believe. Obviously I haven't seen the movie, so I can't say for sure, but I think that's what I've gathered. So in this story, we follow a girl named Yua, and she was childhood friends with Chi, but Chi acts weird. She likes to collect dead bugs, and she runs around with scissors, so Yua doesn't talk to Chi anymore, but basically now they're in high school? Or middle school? They're older now, and she basically gets approached by this boy, and they decide to try to help Chi fit in at school because Chi shows up to school like wearing tattered clothes, and she runs around showing dead bugs to people, so kids don't like her, and they basically decide they're going to help her at school, and that doesn't go very well. As with any Shuzo Oshimi manga, I read this in like 15 minutes, so it was fine enough. I feel like I could tell that this wasn't Shuzo Oshimi's, like, it wasn't his own original work. It was based on something else. I didn't feel like this was his best work at all, either in terms of writing or with the art. It doesn't have any of the part of Shuzo Oshimi manga that I love, which is when he self-inserts his weird self into his manga. That just doesn't occur in this manga, which is fine. It's fine. I can live without it, I guess. But that's just not what I love Shuzo Oshimi for. So the fact that this doesn't have any of that is just not my preference. But it was fine enough. I didn't hate it. I thought it was fine. The ending was intense, I guess you could say. But nothing that I haven't seen Shuzo Oshimi do before. So it's fine, but not amazing. So yeah, that's what I've read today. I'm not sure how much more I'm going to read, but I do think I'm done with horror manga for the day. I have enjoyed my time with horror manga, of course, I love it. But there's only so much of it you can read before you need a little bit of a palate cleanser, so I'm going to read Tamaki Ammane next, and we'll see what I think of it. I'm not even sure what the genre is of this. I think it might have to do with reincarnation. Maybe. It could just be a short story collection focusing on different relationships between people. I don't know. We'll find out. Look, it's a poster. Didn't even realize that. That's cool. So, it's quite a few days later. I did end up finishing Tamaki Ammane. This was the only thing I ended up finishing after the last clip. And I definitely really enjoyed this. And I was kind of correct about the synopsis. Basically, it's a bunch of short stories following two characters, one named Tamaki and one named Ammane. They are different characters in each story, and it just explores their different relationships. Sometimes it's a man and his wife. Sometimes it's like two women who are friends. I really enjoyed that story. But it basically just explores their relationship and their friendship and maybe some conflict in between them and how they resolve it or don't. And I definitely really enjoyed this. In my eyes, Fumi Yoshinaga can do no wrong. She's such a great author, definitely one of my favorites. This is definitely a more emotional read. It is quite sad at times, but I definitely loved it. I had a great time reading it, and the ending was very interesting as well. It really makes me want to reread Oku. Even though I read that just a few years ago, I really loved that series as well. Like I said, I've loved everything that I've read by Fumi Yoshinaga pretty much, and I would absolutely love to reread Oku. But yeah, this was great. Definitely on the higher end of the short story collections I've read in my manga reading career. So yeah, that was everything I read. Let me wrap up and just show you a stack of all the things. So here's everything. It's a very shiny stack of books, but I enjoyed pretty much everything I read, which is fantastic. I'm not always a hater. I will 100% be continuing with Basara. At this point when I'm filming this, I've already started continuing, so really looking forward to getting through more of this. And then everything else was just pretty good. We have some 1 5-star, 1 4-star, and then everything else was 4 stars, I think, except for Toxic Daughter Chichan, which was a 3-star. So yeah, that was everything I've read. If you have any thoughts on any of these that you'd like to share, please leave your comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!